All right, think about one of the most common things in your fridge. You know, that creamy, tangy sauce you slather on sandwiches or mix into a potato salad? We all think we know mayonnaise, right? Well, it turns out we probably don't. Not really.
I mean, you know that taste, that rich, super smooth texture. It's a flavor so familiar, so there. You've probably never even given it a second thought.
But what if I told you that behind that simple jar is a centuries-old mystery, a total culinary cold case, packed with competing claims, a little bit of international intrigue, and a story that is anything but plain? So today we're gonna open the case file. In our investigation, it starts with the most basic question you can ask. Where in the world did that name even come from? Okay, before we dive into the suspects, let's just lay down the facts. What is mayonnaise? Scientifically, it's something called a stable emulsion. And honestly, it's a tiny miracle of kitchen chemistry. You're taking oil and a water-based acid, two things that absolutely refuse to mix, and you're forcing them together. And they're held in this perfect creamy suspension, all thanks to the power of an egg yolk. It's so fundamental, it's actually considered one of the mother sauces of classic French cuisine. Pretty cool, huh? All right, our first lead in this case takes us way back. We're heading to the Mediterranean, specifically to the Spanish island of Minorca. The year is 1756. The 7 Years' War is in full swing, and French forces have just snatched the port of Mahon from the British. Now, here's where it gets really juicy. Look at this timeline. The supposed invention? 1756. But the first time the word mayonnaise actually appears in print in a cookbook, 1806. That is a 50-year gap. 50 years. Back then, before printing was everywhere, half a century is an eternity for a word to just not be written down. This right here is kind of the smoking gun of our whole mystery. So the popular story, the one you'll hear most often, goes something like this. The French Duke of Richelieu's cook is on the island and discovers a local sauce, basically a garlic-free aioli. He's totally blown away by it, brings the recipe back to the French court, and names it Mayonnaise to celebrate the victory at Mahon. Seems simple enough. Case closed, right? Well, not so fast. Because just when you think you've cracked it, a bunch of other suspects start popping up out of the woodwork, each with a totally different story for where the name came from. The main competing theory actually points away from Spain and right back to France, specifically to the city of Bayonne, a place that was already famous for its amazing food. People who back this idea say the sauce should really be called Mayonnaise. And I love this part because you get a real sense of the historical smack talk. A super famous food critic of the day, Grimaud de la Reynière, just completely shot down the Mahon theory back in 1808. He basically said Port Mahon is not known for good food. Ouch. He was convinced mayonnaise made way more sense. But wait, there's more. The list of linguistic suspects just keeps on growing. Some people think the name comes from moyeu, which is the old French word for egg yolk. Makes sense. Others point to the verb manier, which means to handle or to work. Or even mailler, an old verb for to beat. I mean, all of those things are crucial for making the sauce. So the truth? We've got a lot of theories, but absolutely no confession. So, okay, while the historians are still arguing over the name, there is one mystery we can solve with 100% certainty, and that's the science behind how this stuff even works. At its very core, mayonnaise is an emulsion, and that's just a fancy word for a mixture of two liquids that normally hate each other, like oil and water. In the kitchen, they're natural enemies. They're always trying to separate. So how do you get them to play nice? Well, the magic is all in the egg yolk and how you mix it. See, the yolk has this super powerful emulsifier in it called lecithin. When you whisk like crazy while adding oils super slowly, like drop by drop, the lecithin molecules grab onto the tiny oil droplets. They create this little protective bubble around them that stops them from getting back together. And the result? You get that perfectly thick, creamy, and totally stable sauce we know and love. Okay, so we've cracked the science. Now let's track how this sauce, whatever we decide to call it, went from being a European curiosity to a legit global superstar. And to give you an idea of just how big it got, just look at this number. In the US alone, mayonnaise is a $1.3 billion a year business. It all really kicked off when companies like Hellmann's started selling their homemade recipes in the early 1900s, and man, it just exploded from there. And its journey around the globe is fascinating.
I mean, look at this. In Japan, you've got Kewpie mayo, which uses rice vinegar and is a total cultural icon. In Russia, it's so popular it actually outsells ketchup. It's the key to a bunch of their national dishes. And here's a fun fact for you. Chile is the world's third largest consumer of mayonnaise per person. How crazy is that?
Yeah, and if you look at this chart, you can really see the surprising hotbeds of mayo lovers. We might think of it as a very American or French thing, but it's actually Eastern European and Latin American countries that have some of the highest consumption per person in the entire world.
Now, when it comes to just pure market size, who's buying the most overall? Europe and North America are still leading the pack. But the Asia-Pacific market is growing super fast, thanks in large part to the wild popularity of products like QP. But the story doesn't end there. Nope. Today, mayonnaise is facing a bit of a modern identity crisis. Here in the US, to legally be called mayonnaise, a product has to contain eggs. So all those popular vegan versions that use things like soy or pea protein as the emulsifier, they technically can't use the name. And that has sparked a whole new debate about what really makes mayo, well, mayo. So, at the end of the day, after looking at all the evidence, the conflicting stories, and all the linguistic rabbit holes, the original case is still cold. The true origin of the word mayonnaise, it's probably a secret that's just been lost to time. But here's the verdict we can be sure of. Its incredible journey from some mysterious sauce born out of a European war to becoming a staple in kitchens all over the planet, that is an undisputed, undeniable success story. So what is mayonnaise really? Is it a historical accident, a scientific marvel, or just a ridiculously delicious sauce that makes pretty much everything better? The answer seems to be, yeah, it's all of the above. So the next time you twist open that lid, maybe take a closer look. Because you're not just holding a simple condiment. You're holding a mystery, a little piece of science, and a culinary legend that completely conquered the world. The only question left is, what story are you going to see inside?